Queen Letizia's silent power. She enters a room as though the air itself bends around her presence, a measured step that carries more weight than any declaration. Every gesture, a study in control. Every glance, calibrated. There is no need for announcements. The institution recognizes her authority before she speaks. This is Queen Letizia, and the quiet power she wields is both visible and deliberately unseen. National identity is woven into these rituals, and she embodies it without fanfare. Even in the corridors of Palacio de la Zarzuela, conversations pause when she is present. Courtiers and advisors alike understand that influence is not measured in volume. This is the living thread of continuity, a subtle architecture of decisions that ripple outward, unseen but inexorably shaping Spain's future. Decisions about protocol, ceremonial priorities, diplomatic receptions, all pass through the filter of her scrutiny. Her judgment is a silent force, directing attention, guiding action, shaping precedent. What the public perceives as grace is in fact a series of deliberate moves calculated to preserve stability. The world watches in quiet fascination. Washington notes her composure, London observes her restraint, Berlin calculates the implications of each subtle signal. Australia and Canada register the balance she maintains, understanding that Spain's monarchy functions as a node in the larger network of constitutional powers. Power is structural here, not personal. Duty outweighs desire. It is easy to misread silence as passivity. By minute 2, the question emerges: how much of what is visible truly reflects intent, and how much is carefully choreographed concealment? Behind every smile, every handshake, there is a ledger of influence that few outside the palace could quantify. Even ceremonial acts carry weight beyond their immediate context. Invitations to state functions, the seating of foreign dignitaries, the tone of public addresses, each reflects a keen understanding of continuity. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence, in every measured motion, in the decisions that ripple beyond sight. By minute 8, the mystery deepens. Certain decisions are never explained, never justified publicly. They are preserved in the language of discretion, the currency of stability. Advisors speak in whispers. Histories are rewritten quietly, in small margins, ensuring that precedent remains intact without provoking scrutiny. The institution depends on these unseen choices as much as the ceremonial acts on display. Midpoint escalation arrives as subtle tensions flare within the palace hierarchy. Certain protocols strain under modern expectations. Ministers hesitate, diplomats adjust, and yet she remains the pivot around which equilibrium rotates. The first real tests of influence often come unseen, in small disagreements that could grow into larger institutional strains. Point of no return is reached in the quiet moments, when an important decision looms, symbolic, constitutional, unavoidable. The gaze of the international community, from Washington to Canberra, weighs on her. Every step she takes now solidifies precedent, defines limits, protects the institution from crises both real and speculative. By minute 19, future threats are anticipated in silence. Political winds shift, public opinion ebbs and flows, and yet the monarchy remains insulated. The strategy is invisible, influence exercised through careful selection of priorities, delegation, and timing. Each choice is a shield, each absence a statement. Continuity depends upon this subtle architecture of power. The closing moments are quiet but precise. She moves among her duties, fully aware that each gesture has consequence, that each absence speaks as loudly as presence. There is no fanfare, only the weight of decisions that will shape the monarchy for decades. The world watches, the institution persists, and yet the story is unfinished. The edge of history is not a line drawn, but a space felt, a tension between what has been safeguarded and what is yet to unfold. Even in moments that appear ceremonial, there is calculation. Every handshake, every nod, every smile carries weight beyond the room it occupies. Protocol is never neutral, it signals alignment, respect, and authority. Queen Letizia understands that her influence is measured not by spectacle but by precision, a glance here, a gesture there, shaping the rhythm of the palace without ever drawing attention to herself. Ambassadors from Berlin note her timing, the subtle cues she gives to colleagues. In Washington, analysts study the implications of her measured public engagements. London watches as she balances visibility with discretion. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence, in the way she orchestrates attention and manages institutional memory. Even minor decisions can ripple outward. Seating arrangements at state dinners, the choice of charitable causes she champions, the order of ceremonial honors, each a calculated reinforcement of the monarchy's stability. She moves through these layers of influence with an economy of motion, leaving no trace of personal ambition, only the imprint of enduring authority. There is a tension underlying this quiet control. Modern expectations press against centuries of tradition. Advisors speak in hushed tones, yet she navigates these pressures with a calm that is itself a message. Every restraint, every silence, is deliberate. Every public appearance is a negotiation between perception and preservation. At times, one wonders what remains unspoken, decisions deferred or redirected into shadows. These are the elements that define her silent power, the ability to act decisively while remaining almost invisible, guiding the institution forward while leaving the impression that the monarchy is steady, unshakable, inevitable. This is the living thread of continuity, subtle yet unbroken, shaping not only the present but the framework of what Spain's monarchy will be for generations to come. The stakes deepen when the pressures of history collide with the demands of the present. Legal reforms, constitutional interpretations, and ceremonial protocols all intersect in ways that test the resilience of the institution. Queen Letizia moves within these intersections with a careful balance, never overstepping, never retreating, always ensuring that the monarchy remains above crisis. Her influence is a lattice of quiet authority. Ministers and aides adjust around her guidance without realizing it. Decisions are framed subtly, in ways that preserve both the letter and the spirit of tradition. She is aware that the survival of the monarchy depends less on grandeur and more on the invisible architecture of trust and precedent. Continuity is preserved not through proclamation but through disciplined, unspoken action. There are moments when global attention tightens its gaze. Washington questions diplomatic subtleties, London speculates on succession optics, Berlin weighs public perception versus protocol, Canberra and Ottawa register the careful calibration of ceremonial influence. Each international reflection reinforces the gravity of her position. This is not about personal power, but the credibility of the institution itself. Even as crises loom, symbolic disputes, media scrutiny, or the quiet friction between tradition and reform, her presence steadies the palace. Decisions made in near silence ripple outward, signaling control without spectacle. The monarchy's stability, its capacity to endure, depends on these carefully managed choices. By now, one sees that her power is paradoxical. It is most effective precisely because it is largely invisible. National identity, institutional continuity, and the balance of authority are woven together in her every gesture. She moves like a custodian of history, aware that the present is fragile, the future uncertain, yet the thread of continuity must never break. Tension accumulates in the quiet spaces between ceremonies. Certain decisions cannot be postponed, legal interpretations, diplomatic precedents, succession optics, and yet they must be managed without fanfare. Each choice carries both immediate consequence and the weight of precedent. Queen Letizia navigates these moments with an exacting discipline, knowing that a misstep could ripple far beyond the walls of the palace. Her influence is felt most acutely when it is absent from public view. Advisors anticipate her guidance, ministries adjust their proposals, foreign delegations read her posture, her timing, her silence. Behind every public display, there is a lattice of intention, a strategic choreography that ensures the monarchy remains coherent and credible. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in every carefully measured interaction, every decision that leaves no trace of personal ambition. The midpoint of institutional tension arrives subtly, internal frictions rise, ceremonial protocols stretch, public scrutiny tightens. Yet her presence, measured and precise, absorbs these pressures, distributing them across the structure of the monarchy. The palace itself becomes an instrument of governance, a theater in which stability is maintained not through spectacle, but through control of detail. Global observers take note. Washington and London respect the calibration of authority, Berlin considers the implications for constitutional balance, Ottawa and Canberra measure the quiet signals of influence that confirm continuity. Each acknowledgement reinforces the structural power she exerts without overt command. There is an unresolved edge to this authority, certain decisions are deferred, certain conflicts remain latent, deliberately unspoken. These are the moments where her silent power is most acute, shaping outcomes that will only become visible in retrospect. The monarchy's survival is ensured not by force or declaration, but by foresight, discipline, and the invisible hand of influence that moves the institution forward while remaining almost entirely unseen. The point of no return arrives not with fanfare, but in a quiet, almost imperceptible shift. Certain ceremonial acts, once routine, now carry consequences that cannot be undone. A decision regarding protocol here, a subtle realignment of advisory authority there, these choices crystallize into precedent, shaping the monarchy's trajectory in ways that will outlast any individual. Queen Letizia navigates this with a calm exactitude, aware that the institution depends on her restraint as much as her decisiveness. Every gesture, every measured word, reinforces the living thread of continuity. National identity is woven into these small, deliberate acts, a seating arrangement that signals hierarchy, a diplomatic greeting that preserves respect, a charitable engagement that demonstrates the monarchy's ongoing relevance. None of it is incidental. Every detail is part of a larger strategy to safeguard stability, maintain credibility, and ensure that power remains structural rather than personal. Advisors and ministers adjust instinctively around her presence. Even the most seasoned courtiers recognize that the palace functions differently when she moves within it. External eyes follow as well, Washington notes. The subtle distribution of authority, London interprets ceremonial choices as signals of balance, Berlin registers the careful orchestration of influence, and Canberra and Ottawa quietly map the architecture of her control. Each observation confirms that the monarchy's endurance relies upon her unseen hand. Yet for all this control, attention lingers. Some decisions remain deliberately unspoken, conflicts quietly deferred, potential crises held in abeyance. These latent pressures define the edge of her influence, the ability to act decisively without revealing the full scope of her strategy. Continuity is preserved not by declarations, but by discretion, patience, and the careful calibration of every public and private act. In this space, one sees clearly that her silent power is both delicate and absolute. It is a force measured not in visibility, but in consequence. The monarchy survives, adapts, and persists because she has made it so, a living thread of stability woven through decisions that will echo long after the moment has passed. Even now, as ceremonies conclude and the palace quiets, the weight of every decision lingers. Each gesture she has made, every absence or presence, continues to shape the institution in ways invisible to the public eye. The monarchy stands not because of spectacle, but because of discipline, foresight, and the quiet force that guides it from within. Global observers remain attentive. Washington measures the credibility of the institution. London considers the subtle messages sent to allies. Berlin watches the balance of authority. Ottawa and Canberra note the careful orchestration of continuity. All acknowledge that stability is not granted, it is engineered, maintained by precise, almost imperceptible influence. Yet there is no finality here. The story of this silent power is ongoing. New pressures will emerge, traditions will be tested, expectations will evolve. The monarchy is resilient, but its future rests on the delicate tension between visibility and discretion, authority and restraint. She moves forward, fully aware that the consequences of today will ripple through tomorrow. And in that quiet, controlled presence, one understands, the crown endures, the institution persists, and the next chapter has yet to be written. History watches, and it waits.